Thank you for this opportunity to present this evening. Immigration2Oz is a professional immigration consultancy business based in the United Kingdom. We've been here for more than a decade and sent thousands of people to Australia successfully. The next thing you need to look at is the points test. The points test is made up of common categories of age, English ability, qualification, and specific work experience. You need to score at least 60 points on the points test, and it's quite tricky to make those decisions on your own. You can feed stuff into an online program and prove to yourself that you've got 80 points, but maybe you've not looked at it properly. So we offer you a free eligibility evaluation, and if you go to our website on www.immigration2oz.com /evaluation, you can fill in a form there which will come directly into our system, and I personally will look at every single application that comes through there and make a decision as to whether you can, whether you can't, or maybe you can go to Australia, and we will supply you with an eligibility evaluation on that basis. How do you score points? Points for age, first of all. The maximum points for age begins at 25. From 18 to 24, you get 25 points, up to 32, 30 points. And then it goes downhill fairly slowly, 33 to 39, 25 points, 40 to 44, 15 points, and all of a sudden it falls off the cliff. There's no more points for age over the age of 45. Remember, the threshold requirement was 50, age 50, so you can still apply for a skilled visa over the age of 45. But you need to meet the points test by getting points in other manner. So one of those is the English language test. If you have an English a passport from the United Kingdom or from Ireland, Canada, America, or New Zealand, you deem to have competent English, and you can lodge a valid visa application without doing the English language test. However, you'll see from that chart that there are 0 points for that. So if you need points to make up the 60 points, you need to write an English language test. The English language test that is preferred by Australia is called an IELTS test. And if you score 7 in each of the sections, that's reading, writing, speaking, and listening, of that test, you can score 10 points. If you're able to score 8, however, that's called superior English, you can score 20 points. That's not 8 overall, it's 8 in each section of the test: reading, writing, speaking, listening. The English language test is not a university degree English. It is not Shakespeare or writing long essays. It's practical English, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And it's not the English that catches most people, it's more the process or the way that the tests are scheduled. So if you practice, you stand a really good chance of getting in. I have a couple of plasterers who don't speak much language in what they do. They don't write letters in their daily thing. They come to work in the morning, put on the radio, throw mud on the wall, and do an incredible job of getting it nice and smooth. But you wouldn't expect them to have really good English. But I've got 2 plasterers that have scored 9 out of 9, which is the perfect score for English language. I liken this English language test to a driving license test. If I did a driving license test tomorrow, I would fail it because I don't know what the test is all about. However, if I spent an hour or 2 with the driving tester or driving instructor, I wouldn't need to drive the motor car, but I'd need to sit down with him and ask him how this works. And I reckon if I did that for an hour or so, I would probably sail through the test quite easily. Similarly with the English language test, we have what we call a driving instructor. She's an IELTS examiner and also a tutor, and with a little bit of expertise or assistance or tutorial from her, you could probably crack this test and get top marks. Then you get points for work experience. 5 points, 10 points, or 15 points for 3 years, 5 years, or 8 years respectively if you've worked overseas. If you have worked in Australia, they give you a bonus. You get 5 points for 1 year, 10 points for 3 years, and 15 points for 5 years. If you're fortunate enough to have 8 years in the United Kingdom and 1 year in Australia, you can actually accumulate the two and get 20 points. Work experience is based on paid employment on a permanent basis, which is deemed to be 20 hours a week at least. So if you're doing volunteer work, that's not going to help you with that. And the employment needs to be in the nominated occupation or closely related in the last 10 years. They only examine the last of the 10 years. Then you can get points for your qualification. You get points for a doctorate, PhD, 20 points. For a bachelor's degree or a master's, you get 10 points for an apprenticeship, if it's a formal apprenticeship, for a diploma or a trade qualification. There are bonus points based for regional sponsorship by a state government, normal sponsorship by a state government, your partner, if they've got an occupation in the same sole list as yours and has a skill assessment, and there are also points for studying in Australia. With those points, you can now apply for under the SkillSelect system. And SkillSelect is something that's been just short of 2 years. It's a new system that was designed by Australia, unashamedly for them to select the best and the brightest applicants. So a computer will rank and queue all applications, and because it's programmed, will actually make decisions on who it's going to invite. You need to make sure that you've passed an English test, or you've got points for English, and you've got a skill assessment and possibly state sponsorship. It's a complicated process, and on the surface looks very, very easy, but there are so many pitfalls in that for your best possible chance of success, you should use an experienced professional such as a registered migration agent to help you through that process. No longer can you lodge an application for a visa as you could in the past. You have to lodge an expression of interest, and Australia will then invite you, or the computer will then invite you to make an application. So you can only lodge an occupation via the expression of interest. It goes into a pool, and twice a month the computer will send out invitations to those people that have come to the front of the queue or have got the highest marks. You can only be in that pool for a maximum of 2 years before you have to reapply. It will automatically wash you out after 2 years. And you must have all your points valid with good evidence of being able to sustain that when you get the invitation. So the sooner that you lodge your application, the better. The best possible point score you can lodge, the better. And something that we've noticed from statistics that are out there, since this has been in operation, there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've lodged applications for expressions of interest that will not get an invitation, and their application will die in the pool. One of the benefits of this system is that the visa processing times have been accelerated dramatically. Under the old system, you could wait from 2 to 3 years before you got a visa after you'd lodged the visa application, simply because there was a huge demand. This new system has got a method of actually getting the demand flowing in the way that Australia wants it. They can regulate the inflow of different occupations on a month-by-month basis. So what happens after you've lodged the visa application, once they've invited you and you've lodged the visa application, your visa could come through in 2 to 3 months. We'd say about 4 months, 2 to 4 months is an average. And from start to finish, from the day that you signed up with us and to the day you get your visa, the average processing time is about 8 to 12 months. Our record is 5 months, which is unusual, but we would say somewhere between 8 and 12 months from start to being able to get in a plane and fly to Australia. So a quick overview of the SkillSelect system. First of all, you probably need to do an IELTS test or prove competent English. You'll definitely need to do a skill assessment. You'll lodge an expression of interest. If necessary, you'll get a state nomination. You'll be invited to apply once the computer makes that decision, and then you will make the visa application. You need to make the visa application within 60 days, otherwise the invitation will be withdrawn. And then once you've lodged the visa application, a case officer will be appointed, and eventually it will land up in a visa decision. Hopefully it's positive. In our case, we have an incredible record of almost 100% visa grants after lodgement. So the way this system works then is that the computer will review all the expression of interest in descending order of points and will queue them in date of application. And so effectively SkillSelect is a first come, first serve queuing system with applicants with the highest points being able to jump the queue. So if you've got 90 points and I've got 80 points, you're going to get an invitation before I get mine. So the computer ranks all those occupations, and then it compares it against the ceiling or a quota. Every single occupation has got a quota for every financial year. There's a new financial year coming up on the 1st of July, and the quotas will be reset. Any occupations that have been filled already will not get an invitation in this current financial year, and you'll have to wait in the queue until the new occupations or quotas have been selected. So if you come to the front of the queue and there's quota left in your occupation, you'll be invited. If not, you will not be invited and you'll wait in the queue. State nomination is an option. We recommend that state nomination is possibly something you can use if you need to boost your points. If you only have 55 points in your own right and you need to pick up 5 bonus points, you can get it via state nomination. But essentially, you have to go state nomination if your occupation is on the CSOL or the Schedule 2 list. There's no other way of getting a skilled visa if your occupation is on that list. It's another way that Australia used to actually regulate the flow and to put people in of certain occupations where they needed. In other words, the states would have decided where those occupations are needed and will therefore nominate you. So based on these state migration plans, which are negotiated every year between each state and the federal government, each state has got different needs and different requirements, and they're able to alter their state migration plans at any time. This is really a good illustration of what we call a moving target. And this whole problem with SkillSelect, and especially with the state-nominated visas, with visas that are on the CSOL list, it's an absolute nightmare with occupations coming on lists and going off lists and reaching quotas. And so people get halfway through a process and then they find that they're not on the list anymore, or they sit waiting in the wings and waiting for an occupation to come up, and then it does come up and then they make a start and it takes them 4 months to 6 months to get ready. By the time they're ready, that occupation has possibly moved on. So we believe in making you or getting you what we call decision ready, putting you in a position which we can help you get to that, where we are now monitoring the system for you. We've got you to a stage where we can act as soon as an opportunity arises. The minute you were decision ready, you would have been able to make it straight away. So timing is vital to success. If you snooze, you lose. However, it's not the end of the road. If you miss a quota ceiling, you can still progress if you are decision ready. You can progress through other options. The road ahead could be new quota allocations, like today South Australia brought things up, or on the 1st of July, every state will be nominating, producing a new list. So are you decision ready? If not, we can help you get there. Areas of concern in this whole process is, how do you maximize your point score? How do you pass the IELTS test? What marks do you need for the IELTS test? Can you handle the complicated skill assessment procedures? Every single occupation has got a different skill assessing body. They've all got different standards, different requirements for work experience. Work experience is a complicated area of being able to prove your work experience. How do you handle the queuing and the ranking, the medical and the police checks? And bearing in mind now that the visa application charge is the biggest expense item of all, are you prepared to risk that lodging an application for it to be refused? Only 2 weeks ago, we had a client come along to us who'd lodged his own visa application and he'd made 3 glaring mistakes. They picked up one of them and they sent the invitation back to him being invalid and invited him to withdraw the application or suffer a visa refusal. We decided that it was in his best interest to withdraw the application, and he lost something like $6,000 in the visa application charge. So by taking professional assistance from somebody like myself who's a registered migration agent, you can maximize your points to get the best ranking. You can have a speedy lodgement of your queuing position. That makes sure that you've investigated all the visa options. We will make sure that we've left no stone unturned in checking your visa options, and also make sure that your documentation is presented in the best possible way to enhance your application and reduce the risk of refusal. We will handle queries professionally to ensure a smooth route to the visa grant, and we look after your application all the way right through until you've been granted the visa. Remember that an incorrect or a false expression of interest input, if you've claimed something in expression of interest that looks to them to be spurious or dishonest, they could bar you from lodging another expression of interest for 3 years. Why should you use a registered migration agent? There are something like 4,500 registered migration agents in the world. Only 500 exist outside of Australia. The penalty for giving advice in Australia without being registered is a maximum fine of $100,000 or 10 years imprisonment. So nobody in their right mind will give advice in Australia unless they're registered. Unfortunately, Australia doesn't have the legal power, they don't have the jurisdiction to police people outside of Australia that are giving advice. And so therefore there are quite a number of people that are giving dodgy advice throughout the world and taking money in false pretenses from unsuspecting migrants. Make sure that the person you're talking to is a registered migration agent, and remember that a company cannot be registered, only a person can be registered. So you'll receive advice from a qualified and registered professional. Ensure your application has got the best chance of success. Eliminate the risk of expensive mistakes that could cause delays or failure. Simplify the process and remove the stress involved. You also need to protect your rights as a consumer because RMAs are governed by a very strict code of conduct. Immigration2Oz is a registered migration agency. We've got 2 registered migration agents on board. We're based in Surrey. We are always contactable by phone, by email, or in person. I personally immigrated to Australia in the early 90s, and therefore I understand the emotion of immigrating. It's not so much about just selling a fridge or buying a motor car. There's a huge amount of understanding of what the person's needs are as far as immigration is concerned. Your case is supervised by registered migration throughout the process. We care about you. We care about your outcomes. You're not just a number in our business. You're a person. Our team comprises senior legal associates and a former Department of Immigration official. We think outside the box and we examine all available paths. I want to thank you so much for listening, and thanks Train for Gap for this facility and ability to present this webinar tonight. Thank you very much.